Hello? You in there? Hey everyone, David here. Yeah, I'm not even kidding, that is the tiniest of thoughts that I had while walking out of this movie. Are there really beings in my head, a la being John Malkovich, controlling my every thought and emotion? This movie's way deeper than you give it credit for. And the movie that I'm going to be talking about and reviewing is Disney and Pixar's latest Inside Out. It's been a good 2 years since we had the last Pixar movie, and it's been maybe about 5 years since we had the last great Pixar movie, Toy Story 3, in my humble opinion, because Cars 2, I thought Cars 2 was okay, but as a Pixar movie, it was a huge WTF. And then Brave came out, and people loved Brave, but I honestly thought it was also an okay movie. I liked Monsters University, but I never thought, best animated feature film while walking out of it, and chances are the rest of the populace agreed. But now we have Inside Out, a brand new property, a brand new original story from Disney and Pixar, and people were wondering if this is the resurgence of Disney and Pixar as the animation king, to bring you not only amazing animation and amazing visuals, but also very heartfelt storytelling combined with some really great humor. The answer is yes. And in the movie Inside Out, you got this girl named Riley, and basically what the movie chronicles is all of the different emotions controlling her every thought and feeling, and what, like Joy says, what makes Riley Riley, and how they complement one another to form the mind of this girl, and how this plays into every emotion of her life, especially when her life takes a turn, a very life-changing turn in her time, and how the emotions in her head deal with such an event. And that's the thing, is that the trailers for this movie have been kind of ambiguous as to what the actual plot of the movie is. You get glimpses of what is going on, and you get the main premise of what needs to happen in the story, but you never actually know every single detail. So I'm going to try to stay as vague as those trailers were for this review, because seeing this movie unfold and seeing the different characters and seeing how Riley's mind works is part of the enjoyment of this movie. And what truly helps that is the cast of characters that you follow throughout the movie. I mean, every single one of these emotions I liked. I love seeing them on screen. I love them seeing work with each other. I love how colorful they are, both in the visual style of them, which is literally color-coded, but also the personality behind the characters and the actors that lend their voices to those characters, and they all did it perfectly. They did something that every voice actor should strive to doing, and it's why voice talent should be much more appreciated these days, and that is when an actor that is mainly known by name, because you got some heavyweights in this cast. You got Amy Poehler, Bill Hader, Louis Black, Mindy Kaling, Phyllis Smith. We got a little bit of an Office reunion going on here. But what's kind of interesting is that as the movie progresses, you forget the names of these actors, and you're just fully invested in these characters that they were able to bring to life. And you also should find it surprising that as you look through the credits, like I did, you'll notice that there's actually a couple of cameos in this movie from some other named actors that you might recognize. However, I'm not going to spoil them. But let's just say that you're not going to know who played who until you read those credits, and they did a terrific job. And like I said, these characters were awesome to see it being brought to life. But besides the emotions, I also really sympathize with some of the, I guess you could say, human characters, even though these are emotions which make them human. But obviously I'm talking about the little girl Riley. I really felt for her and I know that's a little bit of a pun because that's practically what the whole movie deals with, but I really did, as well as the parents and how they try to keep their relationship intact with the little girl, considering that they're going through this change in all of their lives. And that's ultimately what this movie is about, is what makes our emotions click and what exactly is inside of our souls that makes up our feelings, our memories. Man, this movie can get deep real quick, and it's a freaking kids movie. But out of all of them, the one that I will admit I felt like I needed to push myself to like is Sadness. Sadness is the only one I had a little bit of difficulty liking at the beginning, because she plays that role of that person. I think we all have that one person in our lives, and if you don't have that person in your lives, chances are you are that person in somebody else's life. I think I am for somebody else that is coming to mind right now, but I'm not gonna mention them. But she plays that character that because she's sadness, obviously almost everything that she says and feels has to do with sadness and depression. And towards the beginning, on top of doing that, she also has the need to touch things that she shouldn't be touching, doing things that she's being told not to do. And of course, after she does some of those things, she's like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. And you try to sympathize because they put on that sad face. But then they continue to touch things that they shouldn't be touching and doing things that they shouldn't be doing. And so it was just a minor struggle to like this character because at first I'm just like, sadness, stop. And you have to give credit for Joy not to kick her ass plenty of times because she had the opportunity, but instead, because she's Joy, she takes the much more positive approach to everything that's going on within this movie. So she sympathizes with sadness, and that kind of plays into one of the themes about the movie that's really interesting. But again, I'm not going to spoil because that's one of the amazing things of figuring that out as the movie progresses while you're watching it. But sadness it does wear on you a little bit towards the beginning, but fortunately she becomes a much more likable character towards the end, and more importantly, she fits in with the other emotions, and the movie gives her a reason to belong to Riley's mind, and why ultimately in life sometimes we need a little sadness. And speaking of Riley's mind, that mind of hers is practically a character all on its own. This movie's brimming with imagination. I mean, there's no way that the director who came up with this, P. Doctor, who also did, I believe, Finding Nemo and Up, I think those are the two Pixar movies in his pedigree, if you want to call it that. I'm pretty sure that he came up with a handful of some of the ideas for this movie, but some must have come from his daughter or any kids that he has or nephews, something from a child, because the imagination that goes into designing Riley's mind and how everything works, like the memories, and especially the core memories that are needed to make up her personalities, and each land that makes up the things that she loves, and how the emotions use that, as well as these other things that you find out about Riley's mind as you delve into the deep corners of her mind. I'm making this movie sound like Inception, and it kind of is, but for kids. Because it's colorful, it's brimming with life, and at the same time it's very imaginative, and you laugh and you have fun figuring out how they were able to make some of these things work and how to make it imaginative, while at the same time staying consistent and logical to the story. Because I was thinking this to myself on my way home. If you were to, figuratively speaking, because obviously if we were to do this movie would become a whole lot less interesting and somewhat generic, but it would still make sense. If you were to cut out every single scene that had to do with Riley's mind, it being inside of Riley's mind, dealing with joy, sadness, anger, disgust, fear, or yeah, I think his name was Fear. If you were to cut out every scene that had to do with the emotions and being inside of Riley's mind and going through all these different lands and meeting all these different characters, that kind of thing, and string together every scene of her and her family going through this change from beginning to end, again, kind of a generic, boring movie, but it would still make sense. It would still make sense because you would still have these emotions making sense, especially for a girl that's about to hit 13. And once you hit that time, and I love how the movie kind of plays in on that, emotions are going to run high. And so I love that this movie was able to give you a deeper, much more colorful look to what could have simply been a generic movie. And not only do you get to look into Riley's mind, but they decide to use that method of explaining how her emotions run through her mind with other characters. Not as much as Riley, because Riley's your main character, but ever so often they would peek into the mom or into the dad, and sometimes here and there towards the beginning and at the end of the movie. And just seeing these bits not only brought even more humor to the movie than it already had, and makes honestly, I laughed throughout the movie. But it was during the scenes where we got to see what was going on in the mom's mind and the dad's mind that was hilarious to me. And why was it hilarious? Because it rang true. Alright, they struck some archetypes of what goes on in a woman's head and what goes on in a man's head, especially when they're married. But it's just so true. It just rings so true. And every time we would do this, whether it be in the mom or dad or even in some other characters, it made sense. And that's what made it much more humorous, is the fact that this rang true. And again, this piled on with the humor that we already had with reoccurring characters. This movie is just a lot of fun, filled with a lot of heart and some really great characters dealing with one another. And yes, being that it's Pixar, they're going to pull at your heartstrings, especially towards the end. Now, here is probably where I'll get into probably my only other complaint besides struggling with sadness towards the beginning, is that despite hitting those notes that did make that lump feeling in my throat, especially this scene, I'm not going to obviously spoil it for you, but it's during this scene where I'm like, so, Batman comes out next week. But if I were to nitpick a little thing, is that there's a few scenes towards the end where they go for that emotional scene that's they're going to try to make you cry. But there's one at the very beginning, and when I say beginning, I don't mean the beginning of the movie, I mean like towards the end of the second act or the beginning of the third act, climax-y area of the movie. It's around that area where I feel like the movie almost stops to deliver that somewhat telegraphed moment of one of your main characters breaking down and becoming sad when they weren't sad throughout the rest of the movie. And it's something that Pixar has always done with their movies, but because they've always done it with their movies, people like me who are huge movie buffs or avid Pixar fans are going to pick up on that. And I don't know, to me it just felt like the movie was literally stopping just to say, wah, I'm crying now, I'm sad now. After that, then it hit some other emotional beats that did pull at my heartstrings. But that first one, when we started that roll of emotional scenes, that first one I was kind of like, I don't feel anything right now because this feels kind of telegraphed. It feels kind of artificial, like we're Pixar, so we gotta go for this scene. And this kind of plays into a later scene where we deal with this character that I'm not gonna mention who, because I didn't even know that this character was in this movie until he popped up in the movie, and I'm like, oh, okay, cool. But this character also led to my main nitpick that I'm talking about, and that is that a couple of predictable story beats towards that third act, and I really do mean a couple, like 2 or 3. And one of them was this character that pops up in the middle of the movie, and not as soon as we met the character, but as we progressed and got to learn more about this character, I felt like I was putting together the outcome for this character in my head. And sure enough, it was exactly how I predicted it. I'm like, okay, maybe it might just be me because I've watched a lot of movies, especially Pixar movies, but casual moviegoers like most of my friends, not to insult them, but casual moviegoers or the little kids that went to go see this with me, well, not with me, but that were in the theater. Those kids who probably haven't seen that many Pixar movies. They probably just watched the Toy Story ones and maybe some of the recent ones like Brave or Cars or whatever, but not the early like Bugs Life, the first Monsters Inc., WALL-E, stuff like that. I feel that's going to be new to them. But for me, it was just slightly predictable. But in no way, shape, or form does that stop Inside Out from being one of my favorite movies of the year so far. Definitely one of the favorites of the summer, and one that I won't be able to feel the same way, no pun intended, in the theater probably for the remainder of the year like Inside Out did. I mean, from a different perspective, from a much more nerdy perspective, I mean, we got Star Wars, we got Ant-Man, we got Mission Impossible, we got, there could be several different movies that are going to be released from now until the end of the year, because we're officially halfway through the year. So this is kind of a milestone for movies this year so far, and I feel like Inside Out is the perfect way to wrap up this first half of the year, because not only does it deliver on every facet from humor to emotion to story to animation, not only for an animated film, but certainly for a Disney Pixar film. Welcome back, Pixar. I give Inside Out a solid 9 out of 10. One of my favorites of the year, not probably my favorite movie of the year, and I'm not afraid to say it. Let's just see what we got in store for the latter half of 2015, considering that this is the first year in Pixar history, and a lot of people are saying that this is to make up for last year not there being a Pixar movie last year, but that's kind of not true, because there's been years back in the 2000s where we would actually go a year without a Pixar movie, like 2005, I believe, we didn't have a Pixar movie. We had 2004, The Incredibles. 2005, we didn't have a Pixar movie. And then 2006, we had Cars. And then 2006, from 2006 to 2013, I believe, we had a Pixar movie every single year. But there, we skipped a year. Before The Incredibles was Finding Nemo. And then before that, I think we had 2002, there was no Pixar movie. 2001, we had Monsters, Inc. 2000, none. 1999, Toy Story 2, I believe. 98, either 97 or 98 was A Bug's Life. And then that's where it all started, Toy Story. So let's see what Pixar has in store for us in the latter half of the towards the end of the year during Thanksgiving, where they're going to release their second Pixar film within the same year, The Good Dinosaur, which there was no trailer for at the beginning of this. That was kind of surprising, but I'm definitely looking forward to that because I feel like Disney and Pixar are back on track. So let me know what you guys thought of Inside Out if you have watched it, and I'll see you guys next time.